Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres. And when I'm not hosting this podcast, I'm the Director of Executive Search at Dwyer Partners, where I headhunt top talents in the consumer and retail industries. And if it's the first time you tune into this podcast, guess who we speak with here? Indeed, it's top talents, leaders, and luminaries in the consumer goods and retail industries. Believe it or not, we're now over 180 episodes in. So do go into our website or your favorite podcast platform to entertain yourself and hopefully be educated with some of the industry's top voices. And do remember, we are part of a family of podcasts, which is headed by the CPG guys over in the US. So if you're interested to know what's happening in our beloved consumer and retail industry at the other side of the Atlantic, go and follow the CPG guys. And also, if you haven't yet, remember to follow us on LinkedIn, where you'll join a community of 16,000 plus members, and you'll basically hear about our latest. If we go to events, our new episodes every Wednesday and every Saturday, and also industry news and much more. So one of the hot topics on the podcast has been retail media, this boom that's been here arguably for 4 years. If we start in the US, here in Europe, it's intensified more in the last couple of years. And it's really transformed the way that retailers work first, and then it's also affecting brands. But after the initial boom and building up retail media networks, what is the story now? What's going on with the tech and media capabilities? Because one thing is the beginning, where it was just about being there, and now it's about how you're there and how you can better serve your customer and your consumer, right? So to speak about this, we have a true expert on the topic, and it's no other than Andreas Reiffen, who's the CEO of Pentaleap, a new retail media tech company that's a spin-off from Crealytics, which he also heads up. And we're very excited to have you here, Andreas. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Daniel, for the introduction, and thanks for having me.
How are you doing? I think you're in New York right now, no?
I usually live in New York, but I travel quite a bit to our headquarters in Berlin. So I'm currently based in Berlin.
Which is probably a nicer place to be in the summer than New York, I would assume.
Well, in New York, it gets as hot as it got today in Berlin. So it's pretty similar, with one difference. In New York, usually I'm getting cold in summer because of the ACs. They cool room temperatures down to so that you actually need a sweater. So in this case, I'm in warm Berlin now.
Nice. Great to hear. So, Andreas, exciting times for you. So first of all, I'd like to hear a bit more about Pentaleap and why you've decided to spin that business unit out of Crealytics, the main business.
Yeah, so Crealytics has evolved into three different directions. So we started with a tech-enabled agency business and ran performance marketing campaigns with budgets 50 to 100 million for large advertisers. And at some point, we started building out retail media capabilities and also tech on the measurement side. And retail media has really taken off for us. So we started a couple of years, and now we're seeing rapid growth and a broad adoption of our platform. And now you can tell the different pieces of Crealytics had totally different dynamics, like pure tech business on the retail media side with fast or high growth rates, and a totally different, let's say, investment rationale, totally different investor rationale, and more of a grown, mature, highly profitable agency business. So we decided to give all those different pieces priority. And Pentaleap, where does the name come from? Our first client we had, which was Staples, when they switched to our platform, they saw a 5x increase in ad revenues immediately. So this 5x leap, so we called it Pentaleap. And here we are.
It's a cool name. I mean, it's not easy to choose the name of a new company. I mean, look at the new OTC companies have arguably not the best names. So I think I like Pentaleap, the sound of it. And you actually, Andreas, you actually started Crealytics 15 years ago. How did you start the company and how have you grown the business to what is now?
So maybe because it's a nice story to tell also Crealytics, before I founded it, I attended a marketing class at university, and the professor talked about Google AdWords and explained how you could buy keywords and place your ads. And so I kind of got intrigued by the idea that you no longer had to throw money into a black hole, and started my own research at home. And it was those times of the illegal file sharing services. So I stumbled upon a book that was called Get Rich in 30 Days with Affiliate Arbitrage. So I said, wow, cool, that's my thing. So I read the book, and the advice was open up your Google AdWords account, open your Amazon partner account, buy keywords, link them to Amazon, sell books. If you sell books, you make a commission, and make sure the commission is greater than what you pay to Google. So I tried and burned all my pocket money, got obsessed with this, applied for an internship, got to a company in South Africa, and they really grew their business to a quite substantial headcount within only a year, doing Google AdWords affiliate arbitrage. So this is how I got into the game. And then we launched Crealytics with the idea to build a pure SaaS business around search. At some point, we realized that it would be hard to keep up with the pace Google was showing to always be one step ahead. And we moved this more to towards an agency model, which got highly successful. We had clients like ASOS and Farfetch and About You in Germany, and then later Revolve and so on. And it was in 2015, I guess, or that we realized that this would more move into a product advertising format with Google Shopping. And later on, Criteo acquired HookLogic, and we realized that this thing that first happened within Google would now move into a retail environment. And at that point, the idea formed that we would want to democratize that space and build like a programmatic SSP, DSP model to take the friction out of the market. And then we got into retail media, and took a while until the whole thing started catching up. And it's a good time now to actually carve this one piece out and go all in.
Yeah, definitely. It's worth riding the wave, because this 1 year ago, you could argue, you could speculate on it being a fad. And now, like, clearly it's just here to stay, right? It's just part of the mix.
We were surprised in the last couple of years how much traction it actually got. So initially, it was obvious that this was an opportunity, but we did not expect that things like privacy and cookie deprecation would happen at the same time. We did not expect that there would be so much excitement, also pull from the brand side. You know, what you see is like this double impact. You have a pull effect from the brand side to get all the first party data and push their offerings right at the point of sale. But also you have this margin pressure on the retailer side, so that it's like the push impact, like we want to sell advertising, and both things combined led to this massive explosion of retail media.
Yeah, it's the perfect storm. One concept that I wanted to clarify with you, Andreas, because that's something you've told me about in other conversations, is if you could, like, in very simple terms, separate the supply side and the demand side of media.
Yes. Maybe let's start with retail media has worked so far. So it was an ad network driven approach, I would say, in the mostly in the beginning, where you as a retailer, you had to choose one single provider with a full tech stack that did like cover the supply side, which is essentially like the ad serving, and you have an auction tech component in there, and then you had a campaign manager, so the demand side, and you then funneled demand through a single from a single provider and a single sales force to that specific retailer. The downside of that model is it doesn't really scale as well. It's as a retailer, you have to commit yourself to this just one company, one tech stack, but it's a lot of friction. And if you then compare this to the programmatic industry, there you can work with a multitude of SSPs and ad exchanges, and you have hundreds, if not thousands of DSP being able to deliver demand. And this is much more open, and there's much less friction. And in retail media, at some point, and this is the evolution or the dynamics we're currently observing, this industry has not been very efficient. Why do I make that claim? Because if you see, let's take US numbers, Amazon US is around about 38% market share. But Amazon retail media or Amazon advertising has a share in retail media of 75% or 78%. So the others are underrepresented. So, and we have to ask us why. And the answer is exactly there. This has not worked out well. So we need a more democratized ecosystem. And the way this will look like is that as a retailer, you can choose an ad server or even multiple ad server companies, and you can work with anybody out there to funnel demand in. If you reverse this and come from the other side, it's even more obvious. I know, when you talk about CPG brands, for example, today it can be a nightmare because you are approached by different sellers from a multitude of walled gardens, and everyone wants some tiny slice of your overall marketing budget. In order to spend that, you have to go through once Criteo and then Citrus ad and then PromoteIQ and then some homemade solution. So it's so fragmented that you're probably better off to put all your money just to optimize your large chunk of Amazon ad spend. So a world where this works more seamlessly is clearly a world where, as a brand, I can choose the favorite DSP/campaign manager tool, and with that, I get access to any retailer out there. So it means exclusive contracts on the retailer side are just detrimental to the growth of this industry, and we will see a more seamless, democratized approach going forward. And that's what Pentaleap stands for, and that's what we try to establish.
And why is Amazon so dominant? Like you said, like 75% of retail media is spent on Amazon, basically. I know that they started retail media. How have they kept this dominant position?
I think there's no simple answer to this, but one element is size. In accordance to size, they should own 38% of retail media, but not 78%. So this is not a good explanation.
Like literally double. So
yeah. So, but size also means there is no way around Amazon. So if you, as a brand, Amazon at all likelihood will play a major role in your whole channel mix. So this is a size advantage which gets them into a better negotiation position. But then, and this is exactly the thing that others can replicate, whether you like Amazon sponsored products or not, many people would say, oh yeah, they're intrusive and people are confused and Amazon has lost its soul and it's all bad. The reality is it's not so bad. So people still find what they are looking for, and very similar to Google, and also, by the way, Meta, they all have done the same thing over time. They have scaled up the ad inventory. So organic went down and paid went up and the users stayed. So why is this working so well? Because they have managed to make ads similarly relevant as organic products that show up. And this is, I don't think they have the perfect solution, but it's a good solution. Many others, they struggle a lot. So if you show ads on site, you really have to make sure that users still click on them. And in many instances, what we see in the market, and this is part of our value proposition, people do not click at the same rate on sponsored products as they click on organic products. So the reality is, while you start making some ad revenues from sponsored products, you also damage your conversion rate, and you might eat into your retail margin and eventually even drag your retail margin down in absolute numbers to a greater extent compared to the little money you make on the advertising side. Reason why everyone is like in a limbo state where it's, if we want to make more advertising money, we have to scale up the inventory, but it doesn't work so well, so we better keep it short. And the only solution is make it more relevant.
Yeah, make it more relevant, more personalized, etc. Yeah. Because in the last 4 years, we've seen like Amazon lead, then Walmart has had developed great capabilities as well. But in the last 3 years, we've seen all the other retailers create their own retail media networks, right? Like, how are they? Because there does seem to be a difference between the leaders and the rest in terms of capabilities.
I think Walmart has caught up quite a bit. They have made a major effort. They have built in-house tech. They have followed the same playbook now. So let's say if we take the Google playbook, it's you will see in a 10 years timeline that the cost per click every single year went down, with one exception. This was the COVID year. But clicks get less and less expensive. At the same time, we have this exponential growth of Google's ad revenues. How do they do this? Well, more and more has become an ad. So almost everything is an ad now. Amazon has started with sponsored products just on the right side rail, and then they moved them into the middle. They expanded even more. So as a ratio of advertising revenue and versus e-com revenue, Amazon is currently at around about 13%. If you take Walmart, they are under 4% still, but you can see they have scaled up their inventory. You will see a similar impact, that the CPCs have a tendency to either stay stable or even go down while this is growing at a fast rate. So they are on a track to catch up, but they have a size disadvantage in e-com still, which is very, very hard to overcome.
What about all the other retailers? Like, we know a lot of supermarkets in Europe, for example, have started their retail media networks. Like, what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, my impression is that everyone by now has realized that this game isn't as easy as everyone thought. So it looked like low-hanging fruits, easy revenues, just cash in right now, copy paste what Amazon does. In my opinion, this won't give us the scale we all expected, and it won't close the big gap. And what we need is some sort of syndication, or let's say some a more frictionless industry like we have it in programmatic. What do I mean? Sounds so cryptical. Is simply as a brand, I don't like this fragmentation. As a retailer, however, I want the money from the brands I have built relationships with. So, but this desire to have this one-to-one relationship doesn't work for the brands as a whole. So all the others in aggregate have to find a way to access budgets from the brands in a way that is manageable for the brands. And this will only work if we get the big players like foremost Google, but also Microsoft into the game. And there will be a point of time where those search budgets will be available through all major retail media platforms like a Criteo and Citrus Ad and our platform, where you can just connect this demand, and there will, I mean, it makes simply sense, right? From a brand's perspective, when you spend on search already, you can then check a box and target the entire retail media inventory that is out there without the need of having 20 lengthy conversations, 20 different reportings, and this high fragmentation. So that's what I feel where the bottleneck is today, and what's slowly changing.
It's interesting that you mentioned Google and Microsoft. They haven't really come up that much in conversations that I've had around retail media, which is interesting. What is their role in this whole equation?
It's a very interesting game so far. So Google has tried over several years, but they never made any substantial impact. At some point, gave up when it comes to on-site retail media tech. Not talking about the off-site portion, but now as search within retail media walled gardens is growing substantially, and search on the Google properties has much lower growth rates, it would make sense to target all that inventory, which so far has not really been possible because there was a closed ecosystem, closed technology. What I mentioned, this full stack dominated by a single company without allowing demand to come in from other ends. Now, with more and more programmatic tech stack, the access to retailer side inventory will be much easier. For example, our product comes with APIs. So whoever has demand this demand or those budgets are readily available, it can be easily connected to an API and anybody can access it. So this is the change that had to happen, but did not happen because of power dynamics in the industry. And it's just a matter of evolution. It took a while in the programmatic display industry as well.
Yeah, because if you had to see what there is now, take a picture and analyze what brands and retailers are feeling like in this scenario, how would you define it?
So I feel many brands and many retailers, they are very unhappy today. So on both sides, I mean, on the brand side, there's often the complaint that it's too tedious to manage. There's always the complaint that it's not really transparent. They don't know what they get. There's a complaint that it's some awkward blend of, let's call it a relationship tax, to be able to do business with somebody that is positioned as a pure media game. On the retailer side, there are complaints that it's kind of damaging the user experience, that people don't really like to click on those ads, that is distracting. There is some frustration about fee structures they are paying. So there's a general unhappiness, I would say, and general frustration, which in my opinion will just accelerate the shift to take the sand out of the engine.
Yeah. And how do you envision Pentaleap making a difference in the current scenario?
Yeah. So what we position is always non-exclusive, so a retailer who already works with some ad server or some sponsored products provider, what we do is compatible with that. I give you an example. There are kind of three major use cases we have. One is, let's take the example Home Depot. They use our APIs, and they have this full funnel offering, which is going really well for them, but they want to have full ownership on the front end and how they position this with their brands. So they build their own front end, which is basically stitched into our APIs, and the tech we deliver does the ad serving in a way that we focus on the relevancy aspect and help users to still find what they're looking for, and advertisers will see a superior return on ad spend in that case. So we don't touch the demand side at all. It's purely like a supply side piece of technology. We have a second use case. It's a large US-based pharmacy, and they work with one of the leading sponsored product providers. And we only basically do the ad serving. We don't touch anything else. So ads are being pushed into our system, and we take care of showing highly relevant ads. So where should they rank? Which ones do we take out because users would feel bad about them? What will convert well? How do we place those? How many? And so on. And the third use case, that's a more probably the fully fledged one, that's Staples. They use the same supply side tech I just described in those two cases. So what does the ad serving? Then they do private markets. With our tech means they have our campaign manager that is again stitched into our supply side tech, the ad server. So they handle their direct demand with our, let's call it DSP, campaign manager. They also plug in network demand from one of the incumbent large retail media networks. And they also use our APIs to connect other demand sources. It's compatible with a Flywheel or PackView or Sky, whoever of those, let's say, DSP tools they would like to use. And in addition, they use our sales support layer. So basically tap into the long tail and sell all kind of retail media, including offsite, including email, to just work as an extension of their team. So it's a modular system where you can just choose to do the ad serving. You can then add multiple demand sources. You can choose whether you would like to use our campaign manager. And if you like, you get sales support. But we don't push this at them. It's like a menu of different technologies and services, and they can just take what they feel delivers value in their current setup.
Yeah, and the great thing is that it's part of this composability journey that we're seeing many retailers going towards, which is that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but you're very specialized in specific areas, right? So let's see where this solution can fit in and together with other solutions for other parts of the journey, no?
You know, what's interesting is we talked a little bit about the direct sales approach and network. And you see this in the Staples example in action, because they, on the one hand, of course, need to leverage their relationships they have built with their vendors, their brands. So this is the private market aspect where they use our campaign manager tool. But at the same time, there are national agency budgets that live in a network where Staples alone might be just too fragmented. And so now they're in a position where they can run, or they can unlock the relationships they have built, but they can initially backfill network demand. And if my claim and my hypothesis is right, it will move more and more towards network demand. So this can seamlessly outgrow the direct demand. If it doesn't happen, you just have a different split, but it's all active in one piece, and it's not like you don't have to commit to choosing just a single thing you will then use.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of retailers, like what if you went into you probably do it all the time when you go into a retailer to meet them, what are like the key pieces of advice you would give them, like to a retailer that is frustrated with their retail media network, either because they feel like they're pushing ads in a way that doesn't really honor their reputation as a retailer, or they feel like they're tracked in a text to it? I mean, I don't know, they could have all kinds of issues, but what are like the key things that you would recommend them to really optimize their presence online? I think that we've seen this sophistication journey happening. So what would you recommend?
Yeah, I see a similar picture in most cases. So there's a general sentiment that, well, we've tried this whole on-site thing, especially sponsored products, and this is no longer a new thing. And we hit a ceiling, so now we have to do off-site. And while this sounds so compelling because there's theoretically an unlimited amount of traffic that lives somewhere off-site, the margins are much, much, much lower. And it also doesn't convert as well. It doesn't deliver the same ROAS figures. So as you mix this in, you have a totally different rationale. You don't sell performance. It's more on the branding side. In other words, this will also quickly hit a certain ceiling. And then you get back to looking into on-site monetization. And if you take a look at Amazon, they make round about 75% just with sponsored products. So if you then prioritize things, it becomes clear if you want to grow, you somehow have to fix sponsored products on site. And there are several limitations, and it's kind of always the same. You know, you have a limited site traffic and you cannot easily scale this up. So what you need to do is you still need to generate more paid clicks. And there is a pretty straightforward way to doing so, which is if you make your ads more relevant, you get a higher click-through rate. We see in our platform usually a 3x in CTR, which means we can triple the amount of paid clicks just by making them more relevant. If you do this, you have a second option you can pull, which is you then prove that those sponsored ads perform as well as the organic products you can show. So all of a sudden, you can get over this boundary of having only maybe 4 tiles assigned to sponsored products, and you can make whatever, show 16 or 20 and scale this up to a great extent. So if you go from only 4 to 16, you quadruple your paid clicks again. So we had a factor 3 from the CTR, and then you have an additional factor 4 from inventory expansion. The point is, it's not so easy because you, in the situation where most companies are at, this stuff doesn't work as well. So there is a lot of pushback from smart, numbers-driven people who show evidence that this causes more harm than it does good. So this is the reason you have to go first relevancy and then do the expansion. And that's a proven standard routine we are usually following, and we can replicate this pretty well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And can I ask you a stupid question? Why are retailers not investing more in this relevancy space? Like, why are they not investing more in really when the user goes into their website, the website looks different than when another user goes in?
I think it's due to the fact that the way this industry has evolved was there's a retail website, and now let's free up some ad space and show ads. And if you think about it, this is in essence already the root cause of this whole problem, because users do not care about whether a product is sponsored or organic. they would like to see relevant products. And if they happen to be sponsored, nice, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So the way this should actually be done is you should start from taking all the data you have across e-com, including sponsored products, and calculate the relevancy, calculate a rank, but then make the CPC bids that are on the products part of this overall unified ranking algorithm. In other words, if you deliver a sorting of your website and now a product doesn't only generate retail margin, but also generates ad money, it deserves to rank slightly better. So you move from a siloed approach where you apply pretty basic, simple algorithms to show somewhat relevant product ads. You move into something that is more high-end AI and does a holistic scoring. And this is what leads us to a more dynamic ranking. We have stopped a longer time ago to only say tile number 9, 12, and 18 are sponsored. And we have a carousel. It's all dynamic. So we decide on the fly how many sponsored products we would show and where they should show up. And if things don't work in the sense that people don't click, we make changes and we take it off again.
Yeah. And I mean, all this ad space wouldn't make sense if people didn't invest in it. So for the advertisers, the brands, what type of advice do you have for them? Because I mean, it's like been huge, like the impact that retail media has had on the brands, right? Like, let alone like the complexity. They've had to reshuffle budgets, reshuffle functions. Now you have like FMCG account managers that have to learn about media. But if you had to give them like 2 or 3 pieces of advice, what would those be?
I think the most valuable advice is own and master the measurement. There is no chance at all that you will ever have all the retailers showing you truly, fully incrementality-backed numbers. It's just not going to happen. We never saw this in the old world of marketing either. So the rules of the game are as simple as a publisher will try to sell you the greatest return on ad spend they make you believe in. Because this maximizes their ad revenues. And as an advertiser, you need to know that this is the game. So you should not trust any number you see, and you have to back them up through thorough testing. And we know that everyone is asking for incremental, like incrementality-backed numbers and so on. There's a bit of a hypocrisy also wanted to mention that, because people claim they want to see transparent numbers. But that's not really true, because what everyone wants to see is transparent numbers that look great. So it's not a checkbox thing, great numbers and transparency. What we have is more of a radio button setup. You either get transparent numbers or you see amazing results. But if you see fully incrementality-backed numbers, they will not look as good as what was previously sold to you. And this poses a challenge, because sometimes you then have to go back to whoever is the budget owner and say, hey, you know, like now as we know what the true return is, it's actually a little bit less than what we thought it would be. And this is a difficult decision bias that happens then. And but the ones with a big ad spend, I think this is ultimately the game changer. And this brings me to the second point, which is a more organizational thing. Initially, brands did not have any capabilities to manage digital ad spend. They were sold like, oh yeah, you can be on page XYZ for 2 weeks and this is $5,000. And they said, wow, this looks cool, so let's do that. A professional digital marketer calculates how much do I spend, what is the margin I will realize, what is the customer lifetime value I get over time, and so on and so forth. So CPG brands who do not have a DTC presence need to build out those capabilities. And one of the core capabilities is then the measurement aspect.
Yeah, and to do the measurement, then you need like the huge backbone of data and so on. So it's a lot of work. We recently spoke with the chief digital officer of Pernod Ricard, and he mentioned like how in very little time they've hired 100 people just to manage their data, right? And you need to put in that hard work, that backbone. If not, you're just gambling, basically, I think.
Absolutely. You have to know you fly blind. And sometimes the fact that you get those reporting makes it somewhat worse, because it gives you the illusion of like, oh yeah, I know exactly what I'm getting here. But that's just not the case.
No, exactly. No, it's interesting because actually the word within the boom of retail media, there was a mini boom of standardization. I haven't heard that word for a few months, I have to say. So that's an interesting that you say. How do you see retail media evolving in the coming 2 years?
I think it's we will mostly see now a lot of movement when it comes to the industry structure, and I do see Google, also eventually Microsoft, and those who have already relationships play a more important role, because they are in a position where they can deliver demand pretty easily and very in a frictionless way, and the change towards a more programmatic tech stack, where we will also have like non-exclusive deals on the retailer side, will take friction out of the ecosystem. So my prediction is that we will continue seeing high growth rates, but the network demand aspect versus private markets will become bigger and bigger. So as we see Amazon 1P growing at a slower rate than 3P, similar, I think this third-party demand will catch up a little bit. It won't immediately remove anything private markets. Those two will stay, but yeah, network demand will become more dominant, I think.
Oh, interesting. Well, we'll have to reconnect in a couple of years and see how that's been. And Andreas, you started a company 15 years ago, which now has, I think, you told me, how many employees do you have now?
Round about 200.
So it's gone pretty well. An exciting spin-off now. I'm sure you've learned a lot on the way before with that and with your prior experience. If you had to go back to yourself when you started working, what would be that one piece of advice you would give yourself with everything that you've learned?
I love this question. I think over time, I learned that it makes sense to carve out some time to invest it into personal development and learning. Like if you work like your 50, 60 hours a week, of course, you have a very high level of productivity you get out of the sheer time invest. But if you carve out 10 or even 15 hours per week to educate yourself, to work on yourself, to develop, your efficiency becomes much greater. So from the same amount of hours you invest, you will get much more performance and much better results. So I started prioritizing this rigorously, and I should have done this a little bit earlier, but better late than never.
And if I can ask you, what type of like development time investment have you done on yourself?
Mostly reading. So, for example, I read a lot from Charlie Munger and Decision Biases, Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, behavioral psychology books, understanding how we make decisions, learning, for example. This is another thing. When I look back, the worst decisions always happened when I was overconfident. And when you're overconfident, you make decisions sometimes too fast. You think that everything will go well. A pre-mortem sometimes makes sense. So there's a lot of advice in books, and I think you can learn a lot without making all those mistakes by yourself. So I have my reading hours in the morning, on weekends. I have to admit, like in the last couple of months when business got a bit wild, you throw overboard some of those things temporarily, but generally, if you can, this makes a ton of sense.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, there's time periods of everything. There's time periods where you have to work a lot and time periods where you can sometimes afford to work a bit less as well. So Andreas, I'll try to summarize. I've taken a ton of notes, so I'll try to summarize a little bit what we've talked about today. I think it's very interesting. Crealytics, the story, like started as a tech business, running performance campaigns, and then you got into retail media, which has taken you to actually start a different business, Pentaleap, associated to it. And I love where the name came from, which was growing Staples' ad business fivefold. I think it's a great way to start a conversation as well. And yeah, I think that the industry is going through a lot of change. I mean, we're seeing like from being there as a retail media network with one single tech provider to really going to a more composable solution with these different tech providers working together, coordinated by the retailer ultimately, which has to catch up with Amazon really, which is a retailer that has a 38% market share. But when you talk of ads, has 75% market share. So obviously, I mean, I think that's a challenge, but it's also a good opportunity. I thought it was interesting to hear how the cost per click is getting cheaper because we're going to ads. I mean, I think what all this brings us to is that retailers really have to work on being relevant, being relevant, working on the data stack, so they can apply AI and working on different solution providers so they can be like closer and closer to the consumer. One, and that's a primary reason because it will make the consumer happy if they show more relevant items. And two, because then they'll be able to do better. And as we've learned, even more ads, and they will make more money on that. So it'll be interesting because there's a lot on the mix. We have also the FMCGs, the advertisers. So we'll see how they ramp up their capabilities. You mentioned that measurement is key because we'll never see a standardization across retailers. So every FMCG company or across FMCG companies, you never know, will have to develop their own measurement so they know where to invest and where to not. And yeah, also, I think it's interesting, but as I told you before, Google and Microsoft, important players that sometimes I think are overlooked. At least I haven't heard about them as a retail media players that much. So we'll have to see how that continues within an overall good market of high growth rate. So that's the good news overall. Anything I left out, Andreas, that you would like to underline?
This was very spot on, very good wrap up. Thanks so much.
No, thanks to you, Andreas. It's been really exciting to have you on the podcast, and also we'll be closely following Pentaleap. And obviously, if you have any updates, we will be sharing them obviously through our FMCG Guys LinkedIn page.
Likewise, thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you.
Great. Thanks to our audience as well for listening in, and we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys every Wednesday and every Saturday. Have a great day.